All right, so my name is Lindsay Kibler. I coach the women's lacrosse team at Linfield University. We want to just go around and do some introductions real quick. Nat, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm Natalie Welch. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Business. I'm a coordinator of sport management and also the faculty athletics rep here at Linfield. Go ahead, Jane.
I'm Jane Samuels. I'm the Associate Athletic Director, Senior Woman Administrator, and co-advisor of SAC, Student Athlete Advisory Committee, which is just super fun all the time. So with that, I'll pick on Doug.
Thanks, Jane. I'm Doug Heyer, Senior Associate Athletic Director at Linfield. New title last spring. I've been here started my 22nd year, and I coach football, stepped down from coaching football the past 20 years. I'm also the NCAA Diversity and Inclusion Designee, and look forward to hearing you guys visit with us. How about Esperance?
Oh, you're on mute, Esperance, sorry.
Thank you for inviting me to this introduction. My name is Esperance, and I serve with our Office of Inclusion, Access, and Diversity. And so we're so excited to be engaging in this conversation. Thank you so much. And do I popcorn to the next person?
Well, I think we're just going to do kind of the people mostly involved with WildX. Josie, you want to give a short, brief little introduction?
Sure. Hi, I'm Josie. I'm a junior lacrosse player, and I just help out with the WildX. So if you've seen our Instagram, I do a lot on the Instagram.
Press follow, everyone. All right, thank you, everyone. Real quick before we get started, I just want to remind everyone about our environment here on Zoom. You know, it's a open dialogue. You have the option to get involved in the conversation, or you're welcome to just sit back and listen. You know, we're building trust and respect for everyone's perspectives and input here. It's going to be about 1 hour. We will continue usually for about an hour and a half, but we know we want to be respectful of everyone's time. We know some people need to jump off at 1. So just a reminder on that. And then with our guests here, we're super excited to have Jonathan Riley, Ralen Jones, and Dorian Smith joining us today. Thank you so much. I'm hoping maybe we could just get started with a introduction from you all. And if you could just tell us, you know, maybe where you're from, sports that you've played, and just the overview of the sport initiative that you're involved with. Let's start with, how about Dorian? You want to start us off?
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you all so much for having me. My name is Dorian Smith. I'm from Van Nuys, California, which is in the San Fernando Valley, like just north of LA. So when you watch TV shows or movies and people are talking about the Valley, that's where I'm from. And I'm a former student athlete and professional athlete. I played football at Oregon State, and I went on to play a little bit after. I had enough time to have like a sip of coffee in the NFL, and then went and played in the Canadian Football League for about 5 years in the CFL, and came back to be a grad assistant coach at OSU, got my master's, and now I am the assistant director of Black Student Access and Success here at Oregon State.
Okay, I'll kick it off next. Jonathan Riley here. Again, thank you guys for having all of us. We very much appreciate the space and being able to talk about some important things that is relevant to every one of us. So very much appreciate it. From Los Angeles, California, a little bit south from where Dorian's from. Graduated in Southern California, then chose Oregon State to go to do my business degree. That's where I met Dorian. I did not play football. I played football in high school and decided to forego my opportunities to play collegiately because I didn't think I was going to be big enough, because I was not trying to be getting concussions. So I had a concussion once, and it changed my perspective on football completely. But really, I met Dorian in a communications class, and became best friends from that moment on. And so we had a great perspective of, he was a student athlete dominating on the football field. I was a student leader dominating on the campus, and we just created a great bond to to continue to tell different stories and you know, unite the campus and specifically the athletic department. So yeah, and then we started co-founder of Black Athlete, which is one of Dorian's brainchild, which we'll talk about later, but I'll pass it on to my main man, Ralen. He's also a Beaver. We got some Beavers over here.
Yes, Beavers in the house, go Bees. I'm Ralen Jones, and I'm the founder of Pdx Black Excellence, but I originally am from the Bay Area, so Northern California. I played sports most of my life. I started with baseball, I played basketball, played a little bit of collegiate football, running back, though I might not look it now because the gym's been closed for about 3 months up here in Portland, but usually I'm a little bit more firm or solid than I currently might look. But yeah, so I bounced around. I actually did some time in terms of academics at Arizona State, San Diego State, University of Oregon. I graduated from Oregon State with a degree in business management, entrepreneurship, and then I studied abroad in Denmark, international business option. And then I actually did a little bit in Portland State. So I think Linfield is like the only college that I haven't attended in my entire life, actually. But I do have some friends that went there that played sports there as well. So if I need a recommendation, I got some. But yeah, I'm here, and founded Pdx Black Excellence, and I'm the executive director now. We're a nonprofit, and we partner up with a lot of organizations and schools like University of Oregon and Oregon State for initiatives to kind of bring and promote diversity and inclusion, especially to the Black community and for the Black community. That's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Ralen. I love that you said you've been everywhere but Linfield, but we're starting master's programs. So if you want to go back and get a master's, you can always add that to the mantle there. And I just wanted to give a little background too, because I was, I'm always kind of just trying to stay connected on what's going on in kind of the sports world. It's also like the sports business world, but also kind of that intersection of like social justice and those issues. And I was looking at the Portland 40 under 40, and that's where I saw, this great write-up about Jonathan. And I just reached out to him. I was like, we have to connect, because we'd really just gotten going with our WildX conversations. We started in the summer, and we just saw that there's just a kind of this need for having these conversations, but beyond that, like taking it to action. And like, so I think what I loved about when I met with Jonathan and then Dorian and Ralen is like, they just have this passion to connect people. And I think that's something that I'm super passionate about as well. I could see that really benefiting us all here at Linfield too, the more connections we can make. And like you said, doing initiatives and things like that. I feel like we get caught up in like our silos of like, well, we're at Oregon State, or we're at Oregon, or we're at Linfield, but we don't collaborate enough. So I'm really excited for this potential. And I know we have students who are starting, social justice initiatives as a part of our student athlete advisory committee. But I keep thinking about Esperanza and Kalia had this great event on Wednesday with some of our Linfield alumni talking about their experiences when they came to Linfield and how they felt. Like, I remember one woman, she said that it was like the first time she had to really like talk about being Black all the time and try to explain herself as being Black all the time. And I was curious if you guys maybe wouldn't mind talking about like your college experience and, coming from California to Oregon, and maybe how that kind of influenced you. And another thing they talked about was how, or maybe this wasn't in that Wednesday, but something that happens a lot to Black people is that it's like, if you're on a college campus, you're an athlete. And that's like kind of the like assumption always. It's like, you're only there because you're an athlete. And so I was just wondering if any of you three would mind kind of expounding on your experiences in college and just like your identity as Black men.
Definitely. I'll kick it off first, and then because I know they have deeper, cooler stories than mine, but I definitely was coming out of high school. I had a lot of scholarship opportunities, and I foregoed all of them, like I mentioned, but I still look like an athlete. So I could only imagine everybody. I was still kind of swole and, worked out a lot. It was in my just daily regimen. And I went to College of Business, but anytime I went into the classroom, I was majority the only Black person in the classroom. Obviously, there were no Black professors, no Black leaders, no Black counselors, no nothing, just really figuring it out along the way. And every professor asked me essentially on the first day is, what sport do you play? It was like consistent, and it was automatic, like, oh, I don't play sports. And it was just like, to them, it was like the biggest, like, oh shit, you were actually just doing this because like, and it always kind of just gave me a sense of what I was going to be going up against for the rest of the term or potentially the rest of my college life, as far as setting expectations for myself and then making sure that it's understood and respected to those who I'm trying to accomplish with, because it's not just accomplish for myself, you're actually accomplishing with the staff and the faculty. That's the one big piece that I think most college students don't think about. It's not just the student, it's the entire department that needs to fulfill that success. And then obviously all the different things from going through just, being a daily, just standing out like a sore thumb, essentially. I didn't realize how much, and I know this word is thrown around a lot, but I really didn't understand it at the time, but just how much trauma and how much anxiety and how much depression I was going through until I graduated from college and had my own children. But really, I reflect back on those moments and then really create, what we try to do is create opportunities for students that are going through that now to understand that it's okay and it's normal and it's not something that you need to just be silent about, and be able to understand that there's people that have done it and find out different ways to support them and be able to tell those stories. So that way these things don't continue to happen, which would be a bad way of evolution. Yeah, I think it's very prominent in anybody who's of color, because that's just America. Honestly, it's not just, campuses, but it definitely sucks. And that's something that we proactively are fighting against, and making sure that we have space for not just the students on campus who are there to get their degrees, but also student athletes who are there to get their degrees as well. So trying to massage that into one, which has been a priority for us.
I'll follow up with Jonathan. I just want to go next so I don't have to follow behind Dorian. He's too impressive. So I'll start a little bit further back. So I actually originally moved to Oregon from the Bay Area in high school. And that was a huge culture shock. I mean, I always played sports, which is actually funny that goes to line with this conversation. But I moved like the day before I was going to start high school. Coming from a place that's predominantly Black and Hispanic, like when I look back and think back upon it, it's like, wow, my classrooms, white people were literally the minority where I lived at, or when I was growing up. And when I got to Corvallis High School, I was one of 9 Black students in my entire high school. So it was a huge culture shock for me to navigate through that. Luckily, because I was one of 9 Black students, I was automatically a student athlete, like literally day one, hit the ground running. I had to get my 10 days in, and then I'm a starter in football immediately. Never even played organized football at that moment, immediately interjected into the starting offense, starting defense, and just a part of the sports realm in that community. But the experience, I guess, of just kind of navigating through the lack of diversity, which is kind of a bigger issue more so in Oregon in general than a lot of places, especially on campuses and schools. It was different. It was a culture shock and it was an adjustment, but I did have a coach that was Black. One of the coaches on our team, he worked at HP and he was from Tulane, and he gave a lot of guidance and a lot of consideration, which I think was great. But really what it prepared me for was really what I consider white America. At the time, I had no idea that the rest of the population of the country, for the most part, didn't reflect what I looked like, or what I would think to consider like my normal circumstances, surroundings. So going on from there, it really helped me immerse myself into other places. I'm a traveler. I like to go to different cities and countries, and that experience helped me advance through like anywhere else I went. So that was great for that part. But when I ended up ultimately coming back to Oregon State for school to finish my college education, kind of like Jonathan mentioned, you get there, you're automatically assumed, that, you have a bigger stature for the most part. You're automatically assumed to be a student athlete. You're probably the only other Black student in the classroom more often than not, which also reflects in the workplace here. So that dynamic kind of goes hand in hand with preparing you for life in Oregon, I guess. But, for me, it was just, it was a learning experience, but it was also something that wasn't always the most comfortable experience. It felt like being a Black student athlete, especially when I actually did play sports, in comparison to a white student athlete, like it's just a different dynamic, a different culture in terms you might live by. Sure, there's some overlap because you're a teammate or you have teammates. But you know, the lifestyle is very, I attach on to people that look like me, and a lot of people that look like me, we hadn't had the proper guidance, you know, first generational students. So we're sticking together, but we don't really know how to navigate through this world that we've been interjected in. Whereas what I had saw in comparison to my white counterparts, they had a lot more structure and a different lens of going through college and you know, adjusting between or maintaining student athlete and being a student. It just felt a little different. So I guess for the most part, that's my experience. And, you know, I think it's still prevalent here and, you know, not sure. And so I'm glad people like Jonathan and Dorian are doing things to kind of help guide student athletes along. But I think it's definitely a different dynamic, and that's my experience.
Thanks, y'all. And way to put a lot of pressure on me to be amazing, which I won't be. So I apologize in advance. So I think that was a great conversation that you all had earlier this week, and it's something that should continue on a regular basis, right? Being a Black student athlete, you know, student athlete of color, but Black student athlete in particular is a heck of an experience. You're going to be coming onto a campus where most likely, especially if you're in Oregon, right? The population of Black people is only 2.2%. And most likely the population of Black people on your campus is lower. And the chances of you being a student athlete being questioned if you are a student athlete also makes you think of that question a little differently, right? How often do your teammates get that aren't Black? What does that mean to the value, to their value of Black people in their education, right? And I can't take this skin off, right? So every day kind of feels like a Jordan Peele movie where my thoughts might not be validated, but I know I see this movie a little bit different than my coaches and my teammates, right? And this is something that I go through every single day. So I think that's a really important conversation to continue. I can talk a little bit about my experience and as a student athlete, a Black student athlete. And, you know, I originally attended Alabama A&M University. So if y'all don't know, that is a HBCU, which means a historically Black college and university. So going from California to Alabama was one heck of a culture shock, right? But it was great because I was surrounded by a whole bunch of Black folks. And then I went to, I got the bug to continue playing. I went there to not be a student athlete at all. And I got the bug to continue playing and made my way to a community college and got my scholarship at OSU and made my way there. So when I got to Oregon, it was like, whoa, like where are we at, right? Where are all the Black folks at? And a lot of us were student athletes. But because I had that experience and then also coming from LA, I tried to seek out opportunities outside of athletics, right, to find us. Whether that was participating in like BSU or you know, finding folks like Jonathan, but also I think because I had that experience, right, I didn't necessarily feel like I needed to do things to blend in, right? I've always been unapologetically Black, and I'm probably dating myself, right? But you know, I go to class, you know, back, believe it or not, like I had waves, right? I was fresh. Like I used to go to class with do-rags on, right? But also, right, this weather is crazy. So I used to always wear my football sweatsuit everywhere because it was really comfortable and it was always raining. And I moved from California and the only thing I brought was, you know, shorts and t-shirts and other stuff, right? So I wore my sweats everywhere, but I wasn't aware for a while, you know, what that meant and what that looked like and why I was treated a little bit differently because as a student athlete, you know, I didn't really get to choose my classes, right? So there's certain classes that was, you know, like Black studies, Black history, African American literature, and things like that I wanted to take that I couldn't. And other classes that I was forced to take that didn't really represent me, or the things that I value as a Black student, as a Black person. So there's times when you show up to class late because you got to stay for practice and you got to stay for meetings, and then you got to eat and you got to do all this other stuff. But their comments seem different, right? And the looks seem different when you're wearing that football sweatshirt as a Black student athlete, right? So I think it's important to have those conversations because it impacts not just your experience in athletics, but all over campus. How does having my picture around campus impact like your recruiting? But are you doing things right on campus to make sure that my experience as a Black student athlete and as a Black person is valued? Are those opportunities there that let me know how to access some of these better things? Like, raise your hand if y'all student athletes, like, do y'all know what it takes? Like, what does an athletic director do? If y'all know. Nobody, right? But I know we all know what our coaches do, right? And we all know what our assistant coaches do, right? And a lot of times those assistant coaches and those people in some of these smaller jobs are those folks of color that are those handlers that make sure that we have a decent experience. But on a larger scale, like, where's the Black head coaches? What does it take to do that? And how early do I need to know what it takes to do that? And have those experiences early enough to be able to actually try to attain that later on. So those are things, right? As I reflect on my experience as a Black student athlete, it's like, it's times where you can step up and be a leader, but also there's times where you have to take care of yourself, right? And sometimes there's these conversations where you're just quiet, right? Because for you, race is something that race and ethnicity is something that you can't take off. So it's that has a context in every conversation and how you see the world in different leadership styles. And it's important that you and your teammates and these other folks that might be connected or networked, that might be those next leaders, understand what your experiences are like. But there's also times where you're tired, right? And you need to protect yourself and your sanity. And there's times where you can bring that up along later as well. I know there were times where we had an experience where there was blackface, I think, in the stadium, right? And we did not have a team conversation about that. But we had a conversation in our Black Student Union. We had Black faculty and staff come and talk to us about this situation, and we took it over to the university side. But I'm not sure if our leadership at that time and our coaches were even equipped to have that conversation. And it's important that they are, right? And even when I was a grad assistant, there was a new coaching staff that came and they're asking, why can't we do a blackout in the stadium, right? And you tell them, like, well, historically, a couple of years ago, we had people do a blackout and people came in blackface. And they're like, oh, well, what's the big deal? It's like, okay, you probably shouldn't be working with Black folks if you don't know the big deal about blackface, right? But, right, it's really important, like I said earlier, is knowing, like, what are those opportunities so we can be included in those, and how are those presented to us and how early, right? So probably got that job because it was their player personnel. They were a grad assistant. They were cool with the head coach, and it's like a hookup homeboy kind of job. And when they get there, they don't understand the culture and they don't understand you, and you're supposed to fit in to a culture that you are essentially as a student athlete, especially as a Black student athlete, where we're overrepresented, where you are the foundation for that. So I think it's really important that, you know, you continue to have these conversations and that your voices are heard and that your experiences are centered, because, you know, it's not just for your experience, but hopefully it'll lead to a shift that'll impact folks that come after you as well.
Thank you for sharing that. And I want to thank you all three, because like I know Jonathan, you mentioned like it's traumatic when you go into those situations when you're, you know, you're the only one that looks like you, or, and what you said too, though, is like, it is kind of a reflection of white America too. I mean, it's not just college campuses, but I think we hold up college campuses like, oh, these are these safe spaces where everyone can grow and come into their own. And the administrators and the professors are really supposed to take care of you and protect you. And I think we can really do a better job of really holding that up. And I'm so thankful for you guys for spending this time with us today, because it is, I know it's, you know, it's takes a lot of, you know, vulnerability to share with us this stuff. And it really means a lot to us that you are willing to do that. And kind of thinking about too, like what, you know, after you know, had your student athlete experiences, your school experiences, how did that manifest itself into Black Athlete and the Black Student Access and Success Center and Pdx Black Excellence? Like, what was, can you tell us a little bit about how those came to be and what those look like? I love the kid. Is that your kid, Dorian? Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, I'll start, because again, I don't want to have to follow Dorian, however this works out. But I guess for me, I mean, I come from a big sports family. I love sports, and I learned early on the value of teamwork, and I guess being in those positions in terms of being a captain or being in a leadership role or having accountability as an athlete, because you know, from the outside in, a lot of people don't know what it takes to be a student athlete. You know, the dedication, the commitment, the working out, on top of going to school every day and all the classes, you have to go to practice. You probably need to rest and rehab and recover. You're probably ailing from injury. And at the same time, you know, there are people who strive for more than just sports. Like my goal and focus was just to get my school paid for. You know, so I always put my academia at the highest of levels. But in terms of transitioning that mentality, like the work ethic, the ability to learn, you know, learning a playbook, like playbooks are extensive, you know, like knowing all the intangibles and interchangeable things out there, it takes a lot of, you know, just really commitment to your craft. And I think that for me personally, as I transition to this leadership role, you know, and having a first, you know, now I have a few teams now underneath my, I guess, person. I don't know, but they're, you know, prior to that, they were all more either on the field or, you know, on the courts or whatever sports played out, or a hypothetical scenario like teamwork in college. I mean, I've been a part of other teams like in project management or those kind of things, but to be the leader of a team, I feel like the skill sets that I've adopted through playing sports and some just the mentality, the work ethic, and a lot of those things, they really do transition to putting you in a position like this where you have to be, you know, you can't just sit back, you know, you really can't. Like if you want to strive to be the best version of yourself, the best player, the best leader you can possibly be, you really have to step to the forefront and engage. And I have that within me, and I can really attribute a lot of that core, to myself from athletics. Like it's not something that I've had to work on, and more than likely because I've had to put in the work my entire life since I started playing sports in 6 years old up until, you know, going to college, especially where it requires another level of dedication and commitment. The game gets a lot faster, a lot more intricate, and you know, it requires a lot more than most people will probably ever know. So it's really helped me take on this leadership role. I just feel like it instills a lot of great tangibles. I hope I answered that question. I can't recall exactly what was said in the beginning.
So Ralen, like if for people who maybe don't know what Pdx Black Excellence is, like, can you give us kind of your spiel?
Yeah, sure. So PDX Black Excellence, we're a community organization. We're a nonprofit now, and our goal is to connect and support Black Portland and its advocates for the most part. And we try to promote cultural inclusion and diversity within the city of Portland. And that came about from more so a personal need of my own to, again, see a reflection of myself and my community as I left, because I did end up going back to the Bay Area after college to go live, and then realizing that living on your own as an adult in the Bay Area is ludicrous, like it's way too expensive. So I came back to Portland really just to make a pit stop before I was going to travel elsewhere. And I like the city. I just, I have friends here. I like the city on a pros and cons level, with the biggest con being the lack of diversity. That's for me, especially the older I get, I don't want to settle for not being able to see people that I identify with on a visual level. And as I had some personal experiences here, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to stay here. I mean, I was here. So keep in mind, like now, just to give you a background, PDX Black Excellence is now considered like the largest connectivity of Black people in the state of Oregon now, with our combination and our collaborations and our partners. We technically have an audience of a minimum of 10 to 15,000 Black residents, whether it's in Portland or via the state, which is over 5% of the Black population in the state of Oregon. And that now, you can say I'm at the forefront of that, or at the hierarchy top of that, and I've been here for 5 years in transplant, but for the first 2.5 years that I lived here, I knew a grand total of 5 Black people the entire time I lived here. I live in a neighborhood, Northwest Portland, which a lot of people call downtown, but it's a very dense populated neighborhood, but I think maybe like 3 other Black people lived in that neighborhood, and I didn't really have to do much outside of that neighborhood. So my daily reflection is just not me. It's not my culture. It's not my community. It's my community, but not, my community. And so from, again, some experiences, I put the onus on myself, my own initiative, to either create that community here for myself, or I was going to have to leave. So I was basically in these basically 2 considerations. And luckily, again, maybe due to family and social settings, being, again, a student athlete, or being an athlete in general, knowing, you have to talk, you're forced into situations where you're very social for the most part. I don't want to say you're forced into them, but maybe you are to some degree, but you're usually comfortable in those realms, even if you're not. Like Jonathan, I've suffered from depression and anxiety, but I've still been able to put that aside when I've had to live up to whatever expectations I've had to do on the field, in the classroom, navigating through my world, etc. So I guess, yeah, like, building that up. So yeah, 2.5 years ago, I knew 5 Black people. Fast forward 2.5 years now, I know quite a few more Black people, and we help facilitate that engagement for the community of Portland, and now as we spend out more, more so out into the state of Oregon, but that's kind of what we do. We're the focused voice or audience of Black Portland. So for instance, if you went to our Instagram today or any day, you can see pretty much anything that's going on in the city that's related to Black culture, Black people, whether it be collaborative events, maybe whether it be assisted events or things, anything that's going on, you can find community or the Black community here in Portland on a daily basis. Or if you went to like our website, you can find businesses or services or events calendar. There's not many like real events, but yeah, we're just like we put on curated events, and we put on community-based events also to connect, promote, highlight, and bring inclusion, like diversity inclusion, to the city. So yeah, that's pretty much what we do.
No, that's great. Thank you, Ralen. So I'll save Dorian for last, as always. Keep his hype level high. Jonathan, I want to give you a chance too to talk about. We talk about Black Athlete a lot, but I also want to give you a chance to talk about your creative agency better. And I'm guessing that was kind of born out of your kind of experience at Nike. And but I'll let you kind of tell your story with that.
Oh yeah, thank you, Ralen, for sharing that too. I think just reflecting back, obviously, like I said, I was when I came to campus, my initiative was to also find that community and find people that look like me, and whether that was through faculty, staff, teamwork, peers, whatever it was. And I found myself obviously having trouble finding it, but really having trouble finding the source of or the support from the university to provide it. And really finding out how they're supporting my personal and my personal needs from as a student perspective. So really, that ultimately led to me being, just taking on leadership into that space. So becoming the Black Student Union president at campus, joining Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated with Dorian, then being the president of that chapter, and then growing our membership. And then, so really and then, Beast, the Black Cultural Center, working in the Black Cultural Center. So I was always engaged and almost like literally this driving this conversation, not really as a person that was protesting, but more as a person that's just doing the work and really trying to create those, those roadmaps and support systems that, I had trouble finding, and that I wanted to make more exposed to others. So really that transition to, and as Ralen mentioned earlier, like this whole experience has really helped me at OSU. Like I really don't remember too much from college as far as like what I learned. It wasn't really, I don't think the education was for me, even though I graduated with it. It didn't feel like it was meant for me to have, and I didn't like for me to understand. But the one thing I did walk away with that it proved to be successful was just my ability to work and operate with people that were white and really understand how to, shine, but not try to essentially do too much to at the end of the day. And it proved to be very successful. And I started to realize that was the skill set that transitioned to a lot of the work and business that I was able to do and accomplish from, I used to book concerts out of college. I used to book concerts, and I was mostly working with white bands across the country. Then I went to Enterprise, and that's a predominantly white company, but also like we're competing with each other like sports to sell damage waivers, your insurance, and like athlete and a competitor. I say I'm going to be #1 in the state of Oregon. And nobody believed me, but in 2 months, I was #1 in the state of Oregon. And it was always just my idea of just setting the bar and understanding that it wasn't because I was trying to sell people stuff they didn't need, but I actually genuinely understood it. And I wanted people to make sure that they didn't fall into these traps that, most people normally do. So, and taking my idea of connecting people to not just the opportunity, but to the solutions that exist, and making it as simple as possible for them to understand. And then that transitioned to me within Nike. And then obviously I rode through the ranks at Nike. I started in Nike retail. So I was selling sneakers while finishing my master's. I just had my son. So dug into a lot of balls and things trying to figure out, but still a competitor, still very hungry and still very determined. And this is all the while, so I'm doing this, and Dorian's in Canada, balling up in Canada. I missed, that's the biggest thing I missed was I didn't get a chance to go up there and visit him. But I think I was also suffering from depression at that time. And even though he was ready to pay for my ticket and host me out there, I was really suffering from figuring out like, well, I'm not where I want to be. I'm not where I should be. I got a name tag on my chest, and I'm running around for sneakers, but I didn't take away my hunger to compete and make sure that I was still at the best of my ability. So eventually I, worked through the ladder and went to corporate, and really that was really my first chance of feeling like I was back at Oregon State, where it was just like all white leadership, and they're navigating important people, but at the end of the day, the Black athlete was still the driver for everybody's jobs, as well as the whole brand identity was the Black athlete. So nothing changed from that perspective. It was just now I was doing it for a paycheck, but I also understood the value of what it meant to my community. And really converging my focus on not just doing the job, but making sure that it had an impact on the people that that needed it the most was really my secret ingredient for the brand that really wasn't practiced. So a lot of the work that I started to lead on was combining the communities of color with these experiences that weren't tied to just selling product. And then that's where you really saw this, this genuine approach that transition to the Kevin Hart campaign, which is probably one of my bigger campaigns that was amazing, the Run with Heart piece, and then getting close to know them, but also then transitioning to working with Nike and Seven. I know Natalie worked with as well, and working with Taboo in Uwasha. So connecting him to his native community and then making sure that he understood that and being the driver of these things. And I started to realize like, damn, I'm pretty good at this. And it's really fun. But at the end of the day, I wasn't seeing the results coming back into the communities that really needed it as far as, how are we really supporting these spaces? And at the time, the North Dakota pipeline was happening. And I called some people like, what are we going to do? What are we going to say? This is perfect. Like Taboo's ready to go. Taboo was calling me like, John, I feel like we're ready to do what? And I called the leadership and say, all right, what is the plan? And it was like, well, we can't do nothing. I got a letter from the, the tie-ups that we, our hands behind our back. Why? Because conflict of interest and all the partners and money is high level stuff. And it really pissed me off. And then obviously the Colin Kaepernick piece was happening at the same time in 2016, and nothing was happening. And I saw how the brand took a lighter approach to addressing these issues by just creating an equality t-shirt, which really pissed me off. Because there was no substance behind it. And I saw how it watered all the way down to just the t-shirt, and then obviously expanded from there. But that's when it really hit me. And I said, I want to do something better. And that's when better came to my mind as far as creating something that brings community together, supports communities of color, and actually can be the middleman or the gray area between these companies, corporate America, institutions, organizations, and being able to drive that support directly to the communities that actually they're feeding off of, and how are they going to be able to support them. So that's where I created Better. And then ultimately within Better, it's identifying people that I know and love to bring their best energies out and be able to show them that, whatever company or institution you're working for, they're investing in you for a reason, because of who you are, not because of, everything else. Like there is a reason. And I asked Dorian once, I said, Dorian, what do you want to do? Like and he's diving, he's killing it at OSU, but I asked him, what does he want to do? And he told me, I want to create a better information pipeline for athletes, for Black athletes. And him obviously being a former Black athlete and understanding, I just took his concept, and then I ran with it as far as just being a creative and thinking about it, and and then we just connected and started to build this up. And then we came with Black Athlete, BLAQ, and the Q stands for quality, and making sure that we understand that and putting that sweet spot in identifying our communities as quality more than anything else, not just being farmed and resourced out. So that's a great segue to pass it to Dorian, but essentially that's where Better comes in. It's trying to find ways to, create spaces for communities of color specifically, and then not just talk about it and protest about it, but really just do the work and then let people that support that work get behind it. And it's been proven to be very successful, but more so, it's just great to support people that this didn't exist before. Just like Pdx Black Excellence, it existed in the form of Black Portland, but it didn't exist like Ralen is transitioning and creating this space and connecting and combining these resources. Now it's just really empowering us internally rather than just trying to do it externally. So I'll pass it to Dorian.
Thanks. Yeah. So my experience and how it ties into Black Athlete really comes from my personal experience as a former athlete, my educational experience, and also my experience as a coach and a grad student. So as I said, I went to a school in LA, in high school, and nobody told me about what the NCAA clearinghouse was, right? So I'm taking these classes, I'm doing anything that I can to pass classes, and then I don't start playing sports until later. And it gets to my senior year of high school, and my high school coach lets me hear these voicemails from schools across the country asking about me. And he's like, well, you didn't take 2 years of Spanish, so you can't go to any of these schools. I'm like, dude, that's not my fault, right? So I think I'm done. I go to Alabama A&M University, and I get a ton of support at the HBCU. I start out, and it's, I do what any freshman does, and I'm out in these streets. But they catch me about halfway through my first semester, and they're like, dude, what are you doing here? You came from all the way across the country. you're getting C's, you got a D. Like, are you going to pick it up or are you just going to go home? Right. And that was like the support that I needed. But I still had this passion to play. So I went to a junior college and I wasn't in control of, the classes I took. They said, take this major. It's going to have the most PE classes and it'll get you to transfer to whatever school you want to. Right. So I said, cool. I still think that I want to be a business major because my granddad was an entrepreneur. So by the time I get to OSU as an undergrad student and a student athlete, and they say, what do you want to major in? Right. I said, cool, bet, easy. I'm going to be a business major. And, they told me, well, you got two choices, Dorian. You can be a business major and pay for school, or you can be a scholarship athlete and you can do liberal arts and speech communication. So I'm like, well, option two for me, right? So my original plan was to be a Hall of Famer and be on TV and talk about sports, but that obviously didn't work out. So I did end up playing pro sports and kept my connection with my coaches. So when a grad assistantship opportunity opened up, that's where I went to. And from there, my passion was always trying to help people. And I still had that passion as an athlete to work hard, right? So one of the things that both John and Ralen spoke on is this intrinsic work ethic, right? And that's what all great athletes have. So one of the things that I used to do when I first got there, because I was a JC player, was I made sure that whenever they gave us this list of workouts in the gym, I looked at what the other people that played my position, and I played defensive end. So I tried to get to the quarterback, and I looked at the people that were trying to block me, right? So I made sure that I lifted more than the people that played my position, even though I didn't put that on my card because I didn't need to know all that. And I made sure that I worked hard and did more reps than the people that were trying to block me, right? Because I made sure that nobody was going to outwork me. There was a door in our indoor, right? And I used to go in there at 9 o'clock at night after everything was done and get extra work in, right? Because I knew that I didn't have much time and I wanted to play. And I put everything I had into this school, into the sport, right? I was kind of like Sammy Sosa, if y'all know, he used to be this Puerto Rican, or I think he was Puerto Rican or Cuban baseball player. And he used to say, baseball has been very, very good to me, right? That was like his thing. And that was how I was, right? I was so thankful. And then I finally made it. I played a lot. We won a lot and it was a lot of fun. I came back to be a grad assistant and it was kind of the same thing where I got this ultimatum and it was like, okay, you can sign up for classes and you can drop those classes so you still get your check and you're going to be a full-time coach, or you can go to school, you have a clock to finish these classes and get your degree. And essentially, like, when it comes time to start looking around for coaching, don't expect these phone calls. So the first year, I kind of took the route one. And I was like, cool, I'm going to put this work in. I'll do everything I can. I'm here doing these 18-hour days. That's why I really, y'all coaches put in a lot of work, putting these long days in. And I had a conversation with one black, the one black person they had in academics for athletics. And they're like, bro, are you gonna let them play you like this? Or are you actually gonna get this degree? And he told me, year after year after year after year, black players come back, they get this same ultimatum and they leave without a degree and without a job and with nothing on their resume. So I had this passion, man. I loved helping football players. I loved helping people to get sacks. I loved it because I miss getting sacks. Like, even when we run out for games, I'm like, man, I want to put these pads on to go hit somebody, right? But I couldn't do that anymore. I could physically, I could probably still get like one play before I pull my hamstring right now. But I'm saying, right, I'm at this point. And as I'm coaching, I'm going it's my second year, and I'm telling these guys about my experiences. And, I'm telling them, be careful, right? I've seen guys get kicked off this team for nothing, right? You're not If you're not that good athletically, right? Do your thing in the classroom. I know, I smell this weed on you. Like, go do your laundry. Like, be careful, right? And year after year, I'm getting text messages, and when if guys do leave, they get kicked out. They don't have a degree. They go back home. They're either in the trap or they're working security, doing something they don't want to do, right? And you start getting these things like, man, I should have listened, right? And then on the other hand, right, we have programs that are set up to kind of highlight what we do, but not necessarily put you in a better position as a professional after you're done playing sports. So I decided, man, I'm going to go ahead and get this degree and do what I can, right? So year after year, it continues to be the same cycle. And I'm pretty lucky because I had the opportunity to go play and see people in a whole bunch of different states, in different countries, that played at a ton of different schools when I played professionally. And I started to see like, damn, you had the same experience that I had, right? And then I started to sit in these rooms as a coach. And it's a little bit different when you go from being a student athlete to being a coach, and you're like, whoa, what were they saying about me? And we're talking about these other guys like this, right? So I'm starting to think and realize, like, man, there's a lot of stuff that, one, I wish that I could have known. These things that are happening seem to be part of a bigger system. Two, and three, we're not really talking about it until we're done. So that is kind of where the concept for Black Athlete came from, was to get people who's been there, who's been successful, and folks that also didn't make it, right, to be able to share their knowledge. Two, that's the educate part, right? Because we have three pillars: educate, enhance, and empower, right? So really, it's try to educate, right? Share this knowledge to enhance different things that we have going on and opportunities that we have going on. So this summer, over the summer, we did things that we called the crossover, right? What happens when you want to cross over from sports to your professional career, your next career? So we're asking former athletes to talk about what that's like. So we had people that were, former basketball players talking about the art that they're doing and becoming an architect, and now they're in Europe, to another former professional football player who transitioned into being an entrepreneur, an actor, and a writer, and trying to find ways to say, like, let's have these conversations, but two, like, how do we enhance this and try to find opportunities for our student athletes to have these conversations with some of these former professionals, where you get to ask those questions that you wish you knew, and learn about things that you should know. How do we enhance things that are going on, right? So if you do have a business as an athlete, how do we make sure that we work together to create a network to enhance that? And three is empower, right? So we want to empower in different ways. We want to make sure, like I said earlier, that we know how underrepresented that we are. Because the first thing is for us to recognize the place that we are in before we can actually go about addressing change. So knowing how overrepresented we are as Black athletes in sports, and how underrepresented we are in leadership positions, whether that's coaching, athletic director, or any other part that has a purse string, it's important for us to know that, so we can continue to go back to the educate side and teach you how to get those opportunities, right? And also, like, if you make it or if you don't make it, right, we're starting something that's called First in Finance, and it's something that we're doing with some former athletes that now work in the finance industry, to kind of break down what to do with your money, right? If you do get scholarship money, what does it look like, right? I didn't know what the heck compound interest was, right? But what does it look like if I put $100 away as a freshman, and it takes me 4 to 5 years to graduate, right? So there's different things where, there's part of the system where, I kind of learned as a student athlete where, and I think it's better, right? But there's things where I learned where it's like, dang, like, this system really isn't set up for me to be successful. Like, if I know that I'm like trying to make it, I'm trying to go to the league, and one of the things that I have to do to go to the league is to go somewhere and train and do all this before I get invited to pro day or a combine. And I never got the opportunity or had the time to get an internship or a job. So my resume is trash. And then nobody actually helped me with my resume or wanted me to think about it. And then, right, my only source of income is my scholarship. So I want to find ways to sign up and take online classes so I keep getting my scholarship while I train to try to make it a better life for me after college. And I fail a class and I don't have a 2.0 anymore, and I lose my scholarship because of that, and I can't come back and graduate because I have to open up another scholarship spot for this next freshman that's coming. That is systemic, and it specifically impacts lower income student athletes, right? And understanding and know about some of these things is really important, right? To be able to address those and fix those. So we want to have a platform where we can have people talk and connect and network, and we can highlight some of these issues. We can talk on First and Finance, like, shoot, well, what if you put money away as a freshman or a sophomore, or if you didn't buy those off-whites, right? What does that look like, and how does that set you up if you do get ready to go to the league? What if you are the man or the woman, and you know that you're going to get drafted, but this agent is saying that you should take out a loan so you can look good, and you don't know what interest is when you have to pay that thing back, and your first check doesn't look like what it's supposed to look like, right? So there's a lot of those things where you can get tripped up, and it's like, damn, I wish I would have known this. And we're trying to create a platform and a network for people to be able to do that and to share those things, and to always be unapologetically Black in every aspect.
Awesome. There's so much goodness in all of that. And oh gosh, I get fired up when we talk about this kind of stuff. I'm just like, man, what can we do? How can we fix these systemic things? And but I did want to open it up too I know some people might have to hop off for 1 o'clock, so I wanted to open it up too for people who have questions, or anyone. Feel free to unmute yourself or throw something in the chat for the team.
Dorian, this is Doug. Yeah, question for you. I think the NCAA has changed the grad assistant policies now, where the grad assistants have to actually work towards a real degree. I mean, I didn't know that. I find that pretty sad that you're given ultimatum to how you want to go about being a grad assistant, where a grad assistant is a graduate assistant towards a master's degree or getting a degree. I wasn't aware of that. And I've helped some of my former players get grad assistant jobs, but they got degrees. And I don't know if it was just at certain institutions or if that was kind of the norm for graduate assistants.
I think it's a mixed bag. So I've heard and met with other grad assistants that were kind of going through the same thing, where, it's a similar dream. Like, I'm trying to, just like I want to make it to the league, I'm trying to be a position coach. And that doesn't always work out, but you're told, or not, and it could be inferred just as much as directly told, right, that this is the way to do it, and what's actually important. So I think they did change those rules, but also, just like everything, right, there's different ways to go about it. So now, instead of being a GTA grad assistant, then you can be like, I forgot the name, but it's like a employee, where they pay you what you would get as a grad assistant. They tell you the same thing. It's like, well, you can either take classes and be a grad assistant, or you can be this employee position and get the same check as a grad assistant, and then you don't go to school.
Yeah, I had one of my former athletes, I sat him down and I asked him, because he was my assistant and he had a business degree. And I says, what do you want to do? What's your plan? Are you going to put your degree to work, or you want to coach football? And he says, I want to coach football. And I told him, well, you need to get your master's degree so it gets you more opportunities if you want to go and coach at any level, whether it be high school, college, or whatever it may be. And so he left, which basically I was just kicking him out of the door. But he went to the University of Minnesota, and he actually got his master's degree as a grad assistant. And he's currently now at Northern Illinois as the offensive line coach. But I just felt how important getting his master's would elevate his opportunities. But I just find it sad that you come back as a graduate assistant and you're not working towards a real degree, and they're not making a commitment to pay for your coaching. Coaching is a lot of time. And if you can do it, you can coach and get your degree, so be it. And that's your choice to do that. So.
Yeah, for me, it was a lot of time and money, right? Because you don't get paid much as a grad assistant. So you're supplementing a lot of that out of my savings, right? Not even savings yeah. Yeah.
Go for it, Kenna. Don't have to raise your hand. This isn't class, girl.
I just had to like wave some people down before I started talking randomly. Sorry, I came in a little bit late, so it may have been addressed in the 15 minutes that I came in, but I had a question in regards to, like, any three of you could answer it, but with how much that all three of you do and how exhausting and how much time it takes, especially in the current moment we are in our country, how do you sustain that? Especially on like a mental health level, because I feel like it can be overwhelming, especially being in white America and having to, you're looking out for the interest of other people, but also looking out for the interest of yourself. Yeah.
I can definitely chime in on that. I know we actually just had we had an event last night. We, all three of us sit on the Black Alumni and Friends Network for Oregon State. So we hosted an event called Black Minds Matter, and really bringing in one of our Oregon State alumni who was a Black male therapist in Oregon, one of very few, and had discussions about that as well. But so it was great because these are the kind of things that we if we see a hole, we want to fill it, and I think that's really kind of where our mentality is being proactive on things and not just being the victims of these things. And for me specifically, I know I'm very tired, like emotionally. I'm a father first, which is I have two beautiful children that I prioritize. We do homeschooling, so I prioritize their education. My agency, which works with a lot of institutions, organizations, businesses, individual entrepreneurs, all the way down to our startups, Sneaker Week, Black Athlete. I sit on the board for Pdx Black Excellence. I sit on the board for Oregon State University as for the Alumni Association. So I'm like stretched, and to me, it's more so I'll never be as stretched as my ancestors, like without a doubt. Like there's nothing I can complain about, and for me, I am in a position to carry that baton to the next space. Like it's my responsibility, and if it takes everything out of me, I'm willing to sacrifice it because I know what was sacrificed for me. So I think the part of that, I'm learning as well in that is just the mental health aspect of understanding how to take better care of myself. And up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I didn't really understand mental health at all. It was never discussed. It was never brought up. It was never in my family conversation. It was something that was frowned upon. I didn't know what depression was. I didn't know I was suffering from it as far as I can remember. I didn't know I had anxiety until, I figured that out too. So like, now I'm just more educated and understanding of where my mind and my body resides and how to best support it in the midst of all these things that I've been doing from day one. And that's creating space, supporting my community, and really trying to not just lead the charge, but push people to lead their own charge. And I think for me, connecting with people like Ralen, connecting with people like Dorian, and being vulnerable is a big piece of me. I tell people all the time, my vulnerability is my superpower because it allows me to, open up myself and not feel like I'm open for judgment. I don't give a shit about judgment. It's more so like I am who I am, but I'm pretty damn good at what I do, but I'm also very much intentional about what I do. So it just it helps me to realign my focuses. But it is a tough thing. We put on these events to help, and even we're doing this for the community. It also helps me. So I'm like selfishly doing these things, and same with Black Athlete. It selfishly helps me. Same with Ralen. It started as something that he needed, but now it's helping so many other people, and so many people rely on it. But it's like, to me, it's just, I want to be the Harriet Tubman of my generation. I want to be that person that drives it, and I don't want to be at the forefront of it. I'd rather be in the middle of the pack leading, so that way nobody gets left behind, but also people in the front know that they can create their own pathway. So that's a great question, and I can open it up to Ralen and Dorian. But I definitely suffer from depression, and like I said, I didn't know what it meant until 2 years ago. But now understanding what it means, it's a hole that I can fill. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. So, as I spoke about Black Athlete, I didn't even talk about my full-time job, right? As I work at the university at Oregon State, and in the Educational Opportunities Program, and I am the assistant director of Black Student Access and Success, and soon we're going to have a center on Black and Indigenous student success that I'll be the director of, which I'm really excited about. And it takes up a lot of time, right? But I think, there's something that you all have, right, on top of the other attributes that John and Ralen spoke to as student athletes, right? Is like, you have to be able to manage your time. And it's great. That's not the end all be all. The end all be all also is being able to take a step back, and just like you do when you're playing or when you're practicing, and you notice, right, my hamstring doesn't feel right now. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to take a break. And I might be at 60%, I might be at 75%. I can go or I can't right now. Also taking that same kind of mental health check, finding people around you to build a team that can help see your vision is also something that's really helpful. Having folks like John and like Ralen, being able to check in and be real with them, like, dude, I can't make it today. And having folks be able to kind of fill in for you. And also doing things that you're passionate about, right? When you find what your passion is, it feels a lot less like work. I'm sure the coaches can tell you, like, you can watch film all day. You can be on the practice field like all day, because that's what you love to do. You love to interact. You love to do these things, right? So if you find things that you're passionate about and that you're really passionate about getting better at every day and doing every day, you're probably going to be really successful at that. One of the best in your field, and get paid really well, because you're going to continue to do it and work hard at getting better at it. But also, in getting back to your question, is, always take time to check in. Like, I have this app called Shine, which is a great meditation, self-meditation app. And it's built by 2 Black women, and it speaks to racial trauma. It's really cool. And I can take these time and sit down, and I can have my guided meditation for 5 minutes, or work out, or and do these things. I haven't really been working out recently. That's why I'm in a sweatsuit, because some of my stuff doesn't fit like that anymore. But it's always this, there is this challenge, right? There's a lot going on, and especially right now, there's been this cloud that we expect to move that hasn't, right? And we don't know when it's going to change. So I think it really is extremely important at this time to keep your mental health at the forefront of what you do in the work that you do, because it does get exhausting, it gets tiring, but as much as you work hard, you got to play hard as well. So finding what your why is, and for me, spending time seeing my little 4-year-old grow, playing Madden and Call of Duty whenever I can, and doing other things to kind of fill the time that's just for me, is what's been helping me get me through, and taking naps whenever I can.
Naps are important. Just FYI, the older you get, the more important they feel, though we rarely get them. I'll just do a real quick chime in because they really hit the nail on the head. For me personally, because I'm a person that will just continuously work, but like Jonathan and like Dorian, everything, time management to mental health. Me and Jonathan share a lot of similar experiences, but mental health is very important. Like I know there's always, and what I had to learn is that there's always going to be more to do, more work. There's always room for improvement, room for growth, opportunity to get better, but you have to find boundaries. You really do have to kind of prioritize your time and figure out where you're going to draw those boundaries. So like for me, I know when I'm going to start my day with the work ethic, where I'm going to put it in towards Black Excellence, towards what I have to give to the rest of the world, to the Jonathans, to the Zoom call, to everything else. And then I have to find some time for myself, some time to say, hey, I'm stopping this. Like I have to now put some energy back into me, because if you just give, and give, then you have nothing, you have nothing left. You're like pouring from an empty container or whatever, right? So at some point, the way you're gonna reach your best capacity is just to make sure you can find time for yourself, time to give back to yourself, replenish yourself. And no matter what that looks like, you just have to factor that in, find it at the end of the day, and just know that the days don't ever stop, right? It's like it's always going to be tomorrow, and then the day after, and the day after. So making sure you digest that, because again, you can overwhelm yourself mentally, and if you deteriorate your mental health, then you're no good to anyone, and especially not yourself. So just making sure you're cognitive of the idea that you only have so much to give every day to certain things, and then you have to get back to yourself at times and figure out where those boundaries are.
I have something I just want to touch on. I know we're going to end here in just a minute, so just looking for something brief. But within Linfield, and especially athletics, the athletic department, and you guys had kind of touched on earlier about like equipping coaches and equipping the staff with tools and resources and things to create a more inclusive environment. And where you've worked in athletics, has there been anything that really stuck out to you that coaches have used or done to be just proactive in that kind of sense?
Quite frankly, no. So there's things that we've done just in my role, right? There's this national set of videos called Black Minds Matter, and it looks at the school to prison pipeline for boys and men. So we facilitate that, and we actually take it on a closer level to OSU when we do that. So we have conversations with faculty, staff, administration through this we do it on a 5-week term, every other week throughout the term. And we have those conversations, and it's led to a lot of really positive outcomes. So things is simple, right? As like, how do we look at data? Like, do we disaggregate data to look specifically at Black students when we're looking at course outcomes? There is something that the student athlete started, and is really similar to this, called Damn Change. And I think that would be a really good opportunity for crossover and overlap too, right? As we're talking about some of the pillars in Black athlete, right? Is enhance and empower, right? Is how do we enhance both of these things, empower student athletes at both of the schools, to look at some of these issues that are affecting both of us. But really, yeah, Black Minds Matter has been something that we do. There's this thing called the Social Justice Education Initiative that Jane Waite does that gives you a good overview. But yeah, I think those are things, that have been impactful. And I'm happy to work with y'all too, especially around Black Lives Matter and doing one specifically around athletics, where we can look at the school to prison pipeline, but also look at some of the things that are specifically impacting Black student athletes.
I have a question. If we were to ideally create some type of platform or a system that we would consider inclusive, what would it be? What would it entail?
That's a tough thing to answer because it really depends on. For me, first is like what part, right? So there's inclusive is such a big term and word, but there's so many different parts to inclusivity. So is that to like
what matters for you and the work that you do, and so from your perspective, so that's why it's very broad. So what would matter? So talk from your viewpoint, from your heart, from the areas that each of you. If it was ideal, if you had $90 million, what would you do with it?
Yeah, so first off, I will make sure that we're intentional. There's more representation of Black faculty and staff. And the curriculum, the classes that we teach are like specifically speak and talk to anti-racism and anti-Blackness. And that's, and things that are especially our student athletes, and not just Black, but all student athletes would be able to do, because a lot of the white student athletes also are going to go on to do some really great things, probably be senators and things like that. So to have that understanding would be key. I would have probably a position or someone in HR that's specifically in athletics, because there's different process or whatnot that looks at, one, the onboarding process and how to integrate, how do we integrate some of these anti-racism trainings and practices into the onboarding process of our coaches and staff, athletic department staff, to also make sure that we're being more intentional in where we place these openings. That isn't always just a shoulder tap. I would think that if there is like an academics for student athletes, to make sure also, right, that there's representation there, and that they're aware of things that are happening on campus, specifically around Black students and students of color. I think one thing that would be, pretty amazing, and that I don't think is too big of a lift, would be an opportunity too, right, to enhance opportunities for student athletes to, one, learn about leadership positions, but two, look into, if you are interested, what does a mentorship program look like where we're not having this brain drain of our student athletes. So if there are these graduate assistantships that open up, and we have student athletes that are interested in becoming leaders in the field, and we can have them learn like right there from our different athletic directors, have that mentorship opportunity, and find grad assistant opportunities for them within that field. So then when we're looking to fill different areas, then we have students of color or folks of color that have that experience, have the connection with the university, that are there. I think continuing to have forums like this, but also more than forums, to have task forces where we actually pay, there's not this Black tax where we're just asking Black folks what it is that you need and do it for free on top of all the other stuff that you're dealing with, right? But have these where we're actually paying folks for it, and maybe also if they're, if it's important, have these, diversity positions that are there, have those task force within that diversity position, and have GTAs or different things where it's like fellowships or whatnot, I think Cal Berkeley's grad school did this, where they have a fellowship for grad assistants to that are doing research and work in diversity areas to give recommendations to the school and work on a task force with faculty to make it happen. I think there's a lot of different ways to look at that and to address these issues. I think also, making sure, and it's tough, right? Because, university, we can suggest things, which we do all the time, and we can mandate things, right? And it shows a difference in our response specifically to our faculty, staff, and students. So like if we say, and it's tough, right? Because some of these things are political, right? I know at OSU, we can mandate everyone take I think, what was it? A meningococcal. Everybody's got to take meningococcal, right? Because it was an outbreak that was happening at the school. But because, and I'm not sure, I'm just assuming, so don't go spread this, but in my assumption, right, it's because this virus has become so politicized, you can't just mandate it anymore, right? Like you did with meningococcal, because nobody cared about meningococcal and it wasn't politicized. So I know that there's things that you can mandate and there's things that you can't. And I think it's important to have these conversations about, why can we mandate certain things? But when we're talking about anti-Blackness and racism, then there's this specific pushback, and that there's these policies that are in place that we use when these kind of situations come up, but we don't necessarily address like how those systemically impact Black folks. So I think conversations like this are key. Task forces are cool, but also like I created the Black Access and Success initiative and grew the task force because there's some larger institutional things where we have these circular conversations that end in a report and nothing. So for that part, I said, let's start this initiative and say what specifically can we address, which I really appreciate you asking. So yeah, those are some things, and I can probably talk for hours about more.
Jonathan and Ralen, anything in your wild views to answer the same question?
I'll make mine quick too, so I know you got almost time. I would reference Frederick Douglass, who's one of my idols, and he says, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." And for me, it's the same idea of just, if I had $90 million, I would invest it into the younger generation to be able to start those conversations and build them up into those spaces. I think too much time is spent on trying to re-educate, re-inform, and try to redesign the way things are. And which there is a lot of opportunity into it, but I also say that there's a generation that's still waiting, and they're not being approached, they're not being supported, they're kind of getting the backlash of all these things and not really getting the support for all those spaces. So for me, it's give me $90 million, I would create a program that would be essentially a pipeline of success for younger students to see themselves, to be engulfed around themselves, to build identity of themselves, and then give them a space to choose and understand and really invest in them. That's as simple as put for me.
Yeah, I think that builds on one of the conversations that we have in Black Minds Matter last week was based on Gloria Lassen Billings, who said that there needs to essentially, like when your phone breaks, you take it to the Apple store, and they say that I hope you have everything backed up because we have to do a hard reset. And this is a really good time for us to think about having that hard reset in our areas and continue having those conversations and think about, if we did, what are we leaving out and what are we bringing with us? And I think it's cool to have, our student athletes that are in it right now and folks that have a larger institutional knowledge to continue having those conversations. Like, how do we make sure that this is a movement and not a moment, right?
Can you repeat the question one more time? I might chime in. I just want to make sure I'm answering the right question. Oh,
Esperance, you want to read?
You're on mute.
Yes. If you had the world to yourself, ideally, how would you create an inclusive environment?
Oh, inclusive environment in the entire world, or like in the student athlete realm?
In your world. So, because in your world, so in the student athlete, whatever strength for you, what would you do to make sure that there's inclusion that's taking place?
Yeah.
So the way you desire,
Yeah. Yeah, I personally, as I've started to learn more, as I've lived in different places and I've seen different experiences, like, again, I come from a melting pot place like the Bay Area, where it's just common to see people of different culture all the time, and interact with people on that level. So, it's very kind of liberal in that regard, because, people are just intertwined with one another. It doesn't necessarily your racial identity, though it matters, it doesn't necessarily matter as much because you have that kind of connection throughout your life. But as I've learned and extended out and expanded out to other places, I've learned, like, I met a person who at the age of 6 years old had never met or seen a Black person in real life, and they met one, and she tried to rub the dirt off of their skin because she just thought he was dirty. I met a person that told me they grew up on the coast, and in their entire city, there was only one other family that wasn't white in the entire city or town or whatever. And there was an Asian family, and they just had no interaction with diversity or diverse groups. And when I start to get that idea, like, wow, there's like just people, I'm not thinking about my own situation, but there's people that come from different places and really don't have that genuine diversity interaction. So I think, like, and again, moving to Corvallis in high school, being one of 9 Black students, I mean, it's a completely different experience, in life from where I'd come from. And even for the people that met me when I got there, I mean, they didn't even have BET in the town where I moved to. So they really had no representation of Black people. Honestly, like I was going to mention earlier, or I started to mention earlier, is that, I've had good coaches with my best interests in mind. And I've had coaches with their best interests in mind, kind of like when they try to force you to take certain classes or not. But I've had other guidance where it's like, you are this. So I had a coach when I got to Corvallis, and he told me, regardless, I was just, a young boy. I was a kid. I didn't put too much stock into it, but this kind of resonated with me for the rest of my life. I kind of carried it. I ended up getting in some trouble, just normal trouble that you would get into as a young kid. But it ended up getting me suspended from sports for like a game. And the coach, this is a coach from Tulane, Black coach. She's just there for work, but he just volunteered to be a coach. And he told me, he's like, you are literally the representation of our culture, of our people, to this community, to this environment, this town that has less than 1% Black population in the city of Corvallis. And I was including the football team at the time, or all the sports in the entire city, less than 1% Black representation. And it's just like, so whatever you do, that's how the people of this community are going to identify with Black people. So it's like, at 14 years old, 15 years old, there's a lot to think about or consider, but it did resonate with me. And I realized that for my culture, for my community, I had to project myself in a way that was a good representation. I guess for what I would say, if I could do it, I would create some kind of diversity inclusion program where it's like, you had to go somewhere else that you weren't accustomed to. You had to go somewhere that was different, like part of your curriculum growing up, like you have to swap, like Jonathan said, at a young age, this is a part of a program where you go see different environments that you aren't accustomed to, go be a part of different interactions. I think that's the biggest issue with our society today, is people just don't really understand one another because they can't relate. They don't know where they're from. So you see a lot of the racial tensions that are happening, and it's really because a person cannot understand. Like, most white people can't understand what it's like to walk a step in a Black person's shoe from a different place, and vice versa. Like, until I got, I was fortunate enough for this high school experience to happen before I was able to go elsewhere in the world. But a lot of us, student athletes especially, they're coming from the communities that they're from, that they know, that they're comfortable with, and then they're getting shipped off somewhere halfway around the country or wherever to this very unfamiliar place where they have to now re-identify with just random people. So again, you start to, attach on to what you can visually, feel comfortable with, what resonates with you, but that might not be your best source because all of you guys don't really know what it is, right? You're just trying to figure it out together. So anyways, like Dorian, I could probably speak to this for a longer time, but I would just say creating some really like at a younger age, as Jonathan mentioned, because a lot easier to start early than to correct things later. And just, creating these diversity kind of inclusion programs that are mandatory, not optional. Like I think we get to these optional scenarios and people can choose, but it's like if you were forced to do these things, forced to learn about your histories, forced to interact with other people, other cultures, everybody would be better off. So.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Like that, this has been a really great session, and I want to emphasize too that as long as you would allow, we would love to keep working with you in any capacity. I know Keaton is super excited about the work he's doing with the Social Justice Committee on SAC, and Kenna's also, I know, always involved, and Josie, and even Kalia Esperance. I think we can keep these relationships and just keep working together. It doesn't have to be a one-time thing. I think there's plenty of work to be done. But thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you. And I definitely want to give a shout out to you, Jan, and obviously Keaton. Obviously I've been connected with Keaton, and I know it's very important. All this work that we're talking about, I think it's just as much as, coaches have influence and athletic directors have influence. And most of them don't look like us. It's just as important for them to be on the side of what needs to happen. And just a big shout out to Keaton for being able to be that leader and somebody that doesn't identify with us, but is fighting for those same causes. I think to me that is just as impactful and as important as any of us, Ralen, Dorian, and myself, because it's not just going to come from us. It has to come from both sides, and it has to come from everybody involved. And seeing and working with him and his genuine approach to this, it means a lot. And that's why from day one, you guys have my attention, my energy, my resources, and I know that goes for Dorian and Ralen as well. But we really do appreciate the space and really the time, and just really creating that commitment to making Linfield a better space for not just Black students, but Native students and Hispanic students and Asian students and every student, anybody with a mind. I think that's what the universities are for. There's no different color degrees. They're all the same. They all print. They all paper. And I think that's very important to understand. So just want to make sure I say a shout out to my man Keaton.
Thank you. That means a ton. And thank you guys for taking the time to share this Friday with us. I think this is definitely the longest WildX I've been a part of. So that's been super special and super informative. This is
Wild X, Y, and Z.
Yeah,
we got.
Exactly.
This is awesome.
I'm super excited to keep working with you guys and keep having great conversations like this. So thank you for your time.
Thank you all for your energy. Thank you all. You guys, I appreciate your time and your questions, your thoughts, and really your sensitivity to these things, because I'm sure you all have somebody related next to you that is going through it or doing it right now, and I know it matters to just be able to be vulnerable and talk about it. So thank you all for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for having us. It's been great.
Thanks.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great one.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy snow day.
I got you, Esperance. I'm gonna get on the snow for you, but I make sure.
There you go. There you go. Make those memories. Make those memories.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.